Anybody in the NFL will tell you that one of the most exciting pieces about coming back from off-season is seeing where second-year players stand in terms of taking the next step, whether that was a guy that really succeeded in his rookie year or if he even didn't play that much. So today we're going to go through each NFL team on the AFC side and look at their most important second-year player going into the 2026 season. There's going to be a video with this same theme for the NFC side of the NFL at the exact same time as this video is up. So make sure you go like that video, make sure you watch, subscribe, and make sure you comment down below if you think I missed somebody from your favorite team. Starting in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills, I have Maxwell Hairston, the cornerback that was selected in the first round last season. Hairston actually ended up not playing some of the beginning of the season. He was out until I believe October, but he still came back. He was one of the better players in the secondary for Buffalo. But again, injuries crept up and he missed both of the playoff games last year. Now, he's a guy where, opposite of Christian Benford, he possibly is slotted as the starting cornerback this year, but there was a second round selection used on Davison Igbinosun, the cornerback from Ohio State, in this year's draft. So there's, some conversation whether or not Hairston is even in line for that starting role opposite of Benford, especially given his injury concerns. But that could bode well for Hairston, whether it's something that helps him perform better, whether it's something where he just proves he's better than the rookie. Whatever it is, I think Buffalo is interested in figuring out if Hairston can take a hold of that number 2 cornerback position. And even if it's just something that's where Hairston's really good, Igbinosun's really good, and Benford is really good, all it can do is help Buffalo in the long run. Next up, I have the Miami Dolphins, and I actually have 2 guys for this team. One on offense with offensive lineman Jonah Savaiinea, and one on defense with safety Dante Trader Jr. Now, on offense with Savaiinea, he's the only guy last year that played 100% of the snaps on the offensive line and on the offense in general. He's a guy who last year obviously had I wouldn't say a revolving door at quarterback behind him, but it was not a solidified position. He's going to be a guy that's going to go a long way in helping someone like Malik Willis come in on his new 2-year deal with the Dolphins and hopefully succeed. With Dante Trader, he's a guy that didn't play as much as Savaiinea did last year, but he still is a guy going into this year where it looks like there's going to be a lot of expectations placed on him, possibly as a starter. There were some guys going out from that secondary after this year's free agency period, so he's going to be a guy that's looked at as the, day one starter in the back end of the defense, and he's going to be a guy who, based on last year, he performed really well. He was mostly a special teamer for this team, but when he did get on the field for defensive snaps, he performed very well. Next up for the New England Patriots, I have Will Campbell, the left tackle who was very much scrutinized, especially late in the year and in the Super Bowl after his performance. This has just been a weird start, I think, to an offensive lineman's career. I think through the first 14, 15 games of his season last year, there were a lot of people saying that he was just the next really good and possibly even great left tackle in the NFL. And then he goes through his playoff run last year, and a lot of those expectations changed. A lot of people started saying maybe he's a bust. Maybe he's a guy that wasn't deserving of a top 5 overall selection. I think going forward, if last year was the worst that Will Campbell performs in his career, the New England Patriots have a really good left tackle for the next possibly decade. And I think this second year is going to go a long way in getting his confidence back and getting this team confident in their passing game with him in front of it. For the New York Jets, I have safety Malachi Moore. Now, Malachi Moore was actually a guy I was really surprised to go as late as he did in the draft last year. He was selected in the 4th round in 2025 out of Alabama. He was a guy who, in Alabama, he was a really good player for, I think, 3 or 4 seasons. And so going into his year 2 with the New York Jets, obviously with Aaron Glenn as his head coach and with the just kind of overall vibes with the New York Jets, this has to be a team where defensively they are what keeps them in games in 2026. They're not going to have a high-powered offense. They're not going to have a team that's scoring 30, even 20 points every single game. And obviously last year with his defense, no interceptions, just the turnover rate in general for this team was really, really bad. A guy like Malachi Moore, who started a lot of games last year, played a lot of football, was the second leading tackler on this team. He's going to be kind of the key piece going forward that's going to help turn this team around in general. Moving up to the AFC North, I have Teddy Buchanan for the Baltimore Ravens. The second-year linebacker next to Roquan Smith. I think there's nothing but good that can happen for somebody like Teddy Buchanan. He has the ultimate linebacker next to him and kind of in front of him to show him the ropes of the NFL. He was a guy who last year started 13 games. He had almost 100 tackles. He just was a really good number 2 linebacker for this team. He's a guy who has speed, who can get in the running game. And I think just going forward, he's kind of going to be the guy that's molded in the same light as somebody like a Roquan Smith, someone who can play in the passing game, someone who can get after the run. And he is like the next piece for this next iteration of the Baltimore Ravens, with no longer John Harbaugh on the team at head coach. This is going to be one of the key stars going forward, and I think this year 2 is going to be a real good showcase for him. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I think this one is an obvious one. It's Shamar Stewart, the defensive end who last year only played in 8 games, only had 1 sack. Just more is needed. He is going to be not only the most important second-year player, I think he's going to be one of the most important defenders on this team, just to see if he actually can provide more. Obviously, you lose somebody like Trey Hendrickson, but you do bring in somebody like a Dexter Lawrence who you trade for. You obviously invested a first-round pick into this guy. With everything that went on last year before the season started, with his contract dispute, with the issues with him and the team, the hope is that everything from last year is going to get forgotten. The lack of production, the lack of playing, the contract issues. The year 2 is really going to be almost like a second rookie season for Shamar Stewart to actually show what he can provide this team on the field. For the Cleveland Browns, there are 2 players who were probably the best players on the team for them last year, Harold Fannin and Carson Schlesinger. Now, Harold Fannin at tight end, he was kind of like the do-it-all player for that position. He didn't just play tight end. He even had plays where he was in the backfield last year. He had plays where he was split out wide. He is a guy who came in from Bowling Green State University last year, set all sorts of records for that school at the position, and he's kind of the number 1 now. He is no longer playing behind or with David Njoku. There's no longer really a wide receiver on this team who you look at and say, yeah, he's the number 1 option. It's kind of Harold Fannin and then a bunch of other guys on this team. Now, I highlight Carson Schlesinger. He was the Defensive Rookie of the Year at linebacker last year, with probably no Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I think that's actually already been confirmed that he's not going to be playing this year. And now with no Myles Garrett no longer on this team, he kind of needs to be the guy that's going to step up and become not only a player in the passing game, in the running game, but just a leader in general for this team. With, like I said, no more Myles Garrett on this team. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, I have third-round running back Caleb Johnson. Now, this is a guy who basically did nothing last year. He had 29 touches, only 78 yards from scrimmage. He wasn't an impact in the return game. He just was a guy that wasn't really used last year. He only played in 10 games, and with an old Aaron Rodgers, with a Pittsburgh Steelers team who, at the running back position, yes, they did add Rico Dowdle, but they lost Kenneth Gainwell, who probably was their best performer last year, especially in the passing game. So now you're looking at a running back room that's Jaylen Warren, Rico Dowdle, Caleb Johnson, and Travis Homer. Caleb Johnson obviously is the guy you look at that is needing to step up. We know what Jaylen Warren is. I think we know what Rico Dowdle is. We don't know what Caleb Johnson is, and I think that's kind of what makes him most important of the second-year players on this team, is he kind of needs to show what he's capable of before it's possibly too late for him. Moving down to the AFC South with the Houston Texans, I have Ariante Ursary, the second-year offensive lineman. And he is a guy who possibly is going to be the left tackle for this team going forward. The Houston Texans did a lot of things to improve their offensive line this year. They added Braden Smith, the offensive lineman from the Indianapolis Colts, Wyatt Teller, who was a really good offensive lineman for the Cleveland Browns for a long time. And there's some guys on this team who you hope, alongside both Braden Smith and Wyatt Teller, can improve and make this offensive line not just good, but one of the best in the NFL. They added Keelan Rutledge in the NFL draft this year. Ariante Ursary at the left tackle is going to be the guy that's going to kind of make or break this offensive line. And as a second-year player, that's a really important piece to have, is that offensive lineman at left tackle for the future. And the hope is that Ursary isn't just good at that position, he's great and makes this offensive line great in front of CJ Stroud. For the Indianapolis Colts, I think it's Tyler Warren. Yes, he had a massively successful year last year, but with no more Michael Pittman on this team, with kind of an interesting situation at quarterback with Daniel Jones, who's coming off of a torn Achilles, with possibly we'll see if Alec Pierce can become the number one receiver for this team. But it's going to be Tyler Warren as the number one option, I think. This is a team, in my opinion, who looks like they're kind of in the last stages of this iteration. You have some aging guys like Quentin Nelson. You have some guys on the defensive side of the ball like DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, where you're just kind of, you're really wanting to make sure you get the most out of this roster. All the money they've spent trying to make this a really good team, and I think Tyler Warren is going to be the guy offensively that makes this team go. Now for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think if a year ago you were telling yourself that Bashal Tutin was probably going to be your number one running back going into preseason and going into the regular season, you might have been a little bit scared. I think that's what makes him the most important second-year player for this team, is he's gonna have a lot of opportunities to take that number one running back spot and run with it. No pun intended. You look at that room behind him, is Chris Rodriguez Jr., DJ Dallas, and Amir Abdullah. Definitely nobody there who is an established starter at the running back position. And that's what I think makes Bashal Tutin the number one guy of the second-year players. You can talk about guys like Travis Hunter, or you can talk about guys on the defensive side of the ball, but again, I think it's Bashal Tutin. He's going to have a lot of things thrown at him this year in his second year, and with no more Travis Etienne, the hope is that Tutin isn't just serviceable. He's a guy who takes that number one spot and runs with it. The Tennessee Titans, obviously, Cam Ward is the most important second-year player. He's probably one of the most important second-year players out of any team, especially being at that quarterback position. Whether or not he gels well with Carnell Tate, whether or not the new coaching staff with Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll is successful for Cam Ward in his career going forward, that is yet to be seen. But just his development as a second-year player, it felt like as the year went on last year, we were blaming the receivers, we were blaming the offensive line, we were blaming the running back room. It seems like there's been improvements at every single spot behind Cam Ward. Now it's kind of up to him to show that he's taken that next step and that he is better as a player. Moving over to the AFC West with the Denver Broncos, I have cornerback Jahdae Barron. Now, I already kind of highlighted in a video I made a couple weeks ago about how Barron is kind of going to be the guy waiting in the wings behind Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan, whether or not one of those guys gets traded or just not signed to an extension. He's kind of the guy that's looked at as either Pat Surtain's opposite side shutdown teammate, or he's going to be a guy in the slot who is just massively versatile and massively valuable. This is what makes him going into this second year so important to Denver, because not only can he provide something on the field really productive, he can provide something as a first-round player with a fifth-year option in a few years that contractually is massively valuable to this team. To me, for the Kansas City Chiefs, Jalen Royals is the number one rookie to look at for this team. The wide receiver room with Rashee Rice both recovering from injury and not with the team, to say the least. He is a really important player to see if he can actually become something for this team. Xavier Worthy, Tyquan Thornton, those are the two names in front of him. Those are two names who have really not done a lot in the NFL. And even with Tyquan Thornton, who I think massively overproduced last year, and Xavier Worthy, who has had moments, Jalen Royals should be the guy that kind of takes a hold of a number 2 or number 3 wide receiver spot and helps out when Patrick Mahomes comes back. It's kind of a lot to ask a quarterback to come back the next year after a torn ACL. It's even more to ask him, hey, your number 1 receiver is probably going to be a 30-plus-year-old Travis Kelce at tight end, and see if Xavier Worthy takes the next step. Jalen Royals has to be that guy that really steps up in his second year and takes some of the pressure off of Mahomes and the rest of this receiver room. Another obvious one with the Las Vegas Raiders, I have Ashton Genty. Now, this is a guy who is going to be getting a lot of handoffs from either Kirk Cousins or Fernando Mendoza. He's probably going to be a guy who touches the ball 300 to 400 times this year. I think in fantasy this year, he's going to be a really important player in fantasy leagues. I think he's going to be really important for this team. And we're going to see if he can kind of put away some of that chatter that came up last year of him possibly being a bust selection. I think the offensive line in front of him last year wasn't just bad, it was the worst in the NFL. The Raiders went above and beyond in trying to make that better. They added, obviously, Tyler Linderbaum, probably the best center in the NFL. They made, obviously, the selection of Fernando Mendoza, the number 1 overall pick this year. And just in general, this seems like a much better situation for a second-year running back than it was last year for him. And again, the hope is that he can be the bell cow, whether it's for Kirk Cousins or Fernando Mendoza this year. He just needs to show that he's taken it a step up from where he was last year. And I think even last year was pretty good with everything considered. Another running back for the Los Angeles Chargers, I have Marion Hampton. Now, the Chargers are kind of in a weird spot where they're adding a new offensive coordinator in Mike McDaniel. And Hampton's kind of the guy. Last year they had Najee Harris, but behind Hampton, it's Keaton Mitchell and Jarrett Patterson. Again, kind of a similar situation I brought up with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Two guys behind a second-year player who really have not done a lot in the NFL to become established players. In the wide receiver room, it's Quentin Johnson, Ladd McConkey, and Trey Harris. Not a whole lot. I think there's going to be a lot riding on Marion Hampton and whether or not he improves in his second year to become not just a bell cow, but a guy who can kind of do everything, whether it's in the running game, passing game, and he might even be asked to block a little bit. I think he's just kind of going to be a guy where opportunities at that running back position, he's going to kind of show that he's the best in every situation. I think his talent level shows that that's what he should be. And the other guys on this roster at that position, I don't see who is better than him in any situation. And I don't see who you think would be better served in the long run to get reps than Marion Hampton. That's going to be it for this video. Like I said, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you go check out my other video talking about the NFC teams for this theme. And I'll see you in the next video.